Jacob had a wrestling match, which he won, we can say, because he was blessed, had his name changed, although he suffered some physical results as his thigh was put out of joint and he limped for the rest of his days. But anyway, in this chapter 33, beginning with verse 1, Jacob lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, Esau came, and with him 400 men. And he divided the children unto Leah and unto Rachel and unto the two handmaids. So after the wrestling match, the dawn breaks, the sun rises, and Jacob begins to continue he continues his journey back home. And here he sees Esau coming, and he's got all these 400 men with him. So he's not sure why and what's going to happen. So he is greatly alarmed, obviously. I like the words and the way in which T.H. Leal outlined this chapter in our study. And let me share with you the way that he outlined it. The reconciliation of Jacob and Esau. He wrote, number one, it illustrates the difference between the characters of the two brothers. Esau was generous and forgiving. And number two, in Jacob, there are traces of old subtlety. And then he enumerates, it illustrates the power of human forgiveness. And secondly, it illustrates the tyranny of old sins. All was forgiven, but there was no longer any confidence. So the effects of past sin remain. And then lastly, it illustrates the power of godliness. Jacob's humility before his brother was but a sign of his humility before God. His satisfaction to Esau is a sign also of his reconciliation with God. Interesting. Again, it's from T.H. Leal, or that's the way I'm pronouncing his name. Hope I'm doing it right. The meeting that Jacob was certainly not looking forward to was taking place as he meets with his brother. That's now they've arrived, they have met. And there is avoiding the consequences of our actions, but sooner or later, we're going to have to meet with our actions. I remember hearing a testimony years ago about a brother in the church that for some reason, I don't remember what the excuse was. Usually there are no reasons, just excuses. But anyway, somehow he fell out in fellowship with one of the other brothers in the church. And he got to the place where he just couldn't stand him. And I don't know what it was, but he told in his testimony that one day he was walking down the sidewalk in their town, their city, and he sees this brother coming, and he doesn't want to meet him. So he begins to try to figure out what to do. And he's talking to himself, thinking about what am I going to do? Can I step into a store? Can I walk across the street and on the other side? And as he talked to himself, obviously they got closer. He kept walking, and the fellow that was meeting him kept walking. And he said, finally he looked up and saw the man. He could see now to really see who it was. And he found out it wasn't that brother after all. It was some other man, but he was so convinced and had such a feeling about the brother that he was calling it by what he thought it was. And sometimes when we look at things, we don't see it as it really is. And that's what Jacob was doing. He saw Esau. He saw all these 400 men. What's Jacob got 400 men with him for? When Jacob could only imagine the worst, that Esau is coming to fulfill what he claimed he was going to do. That's killing. But Isaac's not dead. But anyway, regardless, sooner or later, we got to deal with our issues. And it's better that it's dealt with sooner. Better to deal with issues right now than to wait. Well, certainly better than to wait to Judgment Day and find out they're still on our record, that we didn't get it cleaned out. Now, we're not informed here how Jacob was able to reach his traveling party. He had sent them ahead before he had that wrestling match that night. I don't know. Maybe they had just gone ahead a little ways because it was getting late. Maybe they went just a short distance and then camped for the night. Maybe that's what it was. We don't know, but somehow Jacob was able to catch up with them. Now, concerning about his family, he divides them. And no doubt, thinking that Esau is coming, he's going to bring harm to his 2 wives, to his 11 sons. So he wants to be able to have them to escape. So he separates them, he divides them. In verse 2, he says, he put the handmaids and their children foremost, and Leah and her children after, and Rachel and Joseph hindermost. So he divides them here. First, there's the handmaids, and then all of the 10 sons. Joseph is the precious one, so he doesn't put him with the other sons. And then Leah and her children are following after, and Rachel. Let me rephrase that. Let me back up. Let me read that verse again, because I'm not explaining it like it should be explained. He put the handmaids and their children. That's what I'm overlooking. Their children. So what it was, these 2 handmaids, the handmaid of Leah and the handmaid of Rachel, both of them had borne sons with Jacob. So that's what was in the forefront. Not the children of Leah and the child of Rachel. So the sons that have been born by the relationship of the handmaids and Jacob were put in the very first, and then Leah and her children were put together, and then Rachel and Joseph. So from here at the very beginning, Joseph is, he becomes important. It seems like even the foremost importance. So Jacob divides them, and he's still showing preference for Rachel over Leah. On the other hand, maybe he placed beautiful Rachel along with his pride and joy, Joseph, in the rear, so that after Esau had seen everyone before getting to Rachel, Jacob could then show his beautiful wife and son last, emphasizing their importance, maybe to him, showing it to Esau. We don't know, but it's interesting, the movements and the decisions that are made by Jacob. In verse 3, he passed over before them. That is, Jacob gets in the front now, and he bows to the ground 7 times until he came near to his brother. Jamieson Fausset Brown commentators, he said the manner of he bowed himself 7 times. The manner of doing this is by looking towards a superior and bowing with the upper part of the body brought parallel to the ground, then advancing a few steps and bowing again. This was a token of profound respect, and though very marked, it would appear natural. For Esau, being the elder brother, was, according to the custom of the East, entitled to respectful treatment from his younger brother. Jamieson Fawcett Brown. Well, if there had been any plans of Esau bringing harm to Jacob, as Jacob was surmising that's what it would be, although there is no indication that Esau had any such plans, of course. And such action on Jacob's part was, of course, to disarm Esau before he ever shot a first arrow or threw a first club or whatever. Verse 4, Esau ran to meet him and embraced him and fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. That's verse 4. Now, I think it's important that we notice that although Jacob was the one who bowed profusely, showing honor and respect to his brother Esau, it was Esau that ran to embrace his brother. So it's interesting. I like the term or the comment of David Gusick. This probably terrified Jacob. Surely he thought his life would soon end. Instead, God was working in Esau, and he only wanted to bless Jacob. Fell on his neck, kissed him, and they wept. Esau and Jacob did not feel a need to work out the past. God worked in both their hearts, and there was no need to dredge it up all up again. What was past was past. Mr. Gusick. In verse 5, he lifted up his eyes, that is Esau. He lifted up his eyes and saw the women and the children and said, who are those with thee? And he said, the children which God hath graciously given thy servant. So Jacob, he now has, 12 children altogether, counting the daughter. And the eldest could not be much above, 14 to 18 years of age. But anyway, Jacob, he continues to in his effort to disarm Esau by saying, thy servant. If there happened to be, remain any hatred after that hugging together. While Esau came with 400 men, Jacob had shown by his abundance of cattle and servants that he as well was endowed and blessed with Jehovah's blessings. But Jacob, he didn't choose to brag about what he had in competition with Esau. They weren't comparing herds or flocks in this, or Jacob didn't. But anyway, their meeting, no doubt, was quite different from what either brother thought it would be. What were the thoughts of Esau? Well, evidently, there was no burning hatred in the heart of Esau, or he wouldn't have ran to hug his brother. But maybe in those 400 men, why did he bring 400? Again, we don't know for sure. But let us imagine that Esau had no way of knowing what their meeting would turn out to be. And so maybe he brought plenty of help. In verse 6 and 7, then the handmaidens came near, they and their children, and they bowed themselves. And Leah also with her children came near and bowed themselves. And after came Joseph near and Rachel, and they bowed themselves. Now, notice, if you will, again, the alignment that's given here. Was there purpose in this arrangement? Or did it just happen that Leah is placed before her children, but Joseph is placed before his mother, Rachel. That's interesting. Again, maybe I'm just picking, reading between the lines or whatever, but it's interesting the way it's recorded here. Again, we have Leah coming with her children following her. But when it gets to Rachel, it mentions Joseph and then Rachel following Joseph. Again, we don't know. The Bishop Loaf, the Hebrew doctors here observe that Joseph goes before his mother, but the mothers of all the rest went before their children, of which I think it is not needful to seek a reason. Okay? For it is likely Moses did not take care, place his words exactly. Or if he did, no more ought to be made of it than this, that Joseph, being a goodly child, his mother put him before her, as we commonly do when we would show a child to advantage. Or he, being young and a forward child, stepped before his mother, as children are wont to do when some fine show appears, which they eagerly desire to behold. Bishop Law. Well, anyway, that sounds like some good reasoning as well. In verse 8, and he said, what meanest thou by all this drove which I met? And he said, these are to find grace in the sight of my Lord. So the servants who had met with Esau, they had already informed Esau the purpose of the cattle that Jacob had sent up to be given to Esau. And possibly Esau was anxious to hear it personally from Jacob, his brother. Again, Jacob's response to find grace in the sight of my Lord. There are two things let us point out here about this. Number one, Jacob is still not certain about the actions of Esau. He had 400 men with him, even though he got hugged by his brother. But is it a real hug? And number two, can Esau really show grace for me for what I did to him? So again, possibly these thoughts were running through the mind of Jacob. Again, we don't know, but we wonder. In verse 9, Esau said, I have enough, my brother. Keep that thou hast unto thyself. Mr. Hawker, he points out something about this statement that I want to share with you. He wrote that there is a difference in the expression of enough in this verse. The same expression in Genesis 33 and 9, Jacob's enough means I have all. I have all. And so he had, according to Paul's explanation of covenant blessings, 1 Corinthians chapter 3. Now in verse 10, Jacob said, nay, I pray thee, now I have found grace in thy sight, then receive my present at my hand, for therefore I have seen thy face, as though I had seen the face of God, and thou wast pleased with me. My. This interesting expression here, I have seen as though I had seen the face of God. I like Mr. Hastings, that old-time preacher and writer of many years ago, in his commentaries on the Speaker's Bible. He wrote, no greater tribute than this could be paid by one man to another. The strange thing is that it was paid by a religious man to a brother who was not religious. For Jacob, with all his ugly faults, was a religious man, whereas Esau was a pagan, uh, a rough, lusty man of the desert. Yet it was of this man Jacob said, I have seen thy face as it had been the face of God. The words of Mr. Hastings. Mr. Clark, Adam Clark, he as well points out something concerning the customs of that day when he wrote, Jacob could not be certain that he had found favor with Esau unless the present had been received. For in accepting it, Esau necessarily became his friend, according to the custom of those times. And in that country, in the Eastern countries, if your present be received by your superior, you may rely on his friendship. And if it be not received, you have everything to fear. It is on this ground that Jacob was so urgent with Esau to receive his present, because he knew that after this, he must treat him as a friend. That sounds good. In verse 11, take, I pray thee, my blessing that is brought to thee, because God hath dealt graciously with me, and because I have enough. And he urged him, and he took it. Again, we're looking at the customs of the people of that period of time, their actions as well, and maybe more so, reveal their true feelings, that they were honest and portraying what they really felt. In verse 12, he said, let us take our journey and let us go, and I will go before thee. So here Esau is emphasizing, I think we could say, his friendship, and that everything's all right, as they say, hunky-dory. So he offers to lead Jacob and his company to his land and give them welcome, as well as added more to the attitude. But verse 13, he said unto him, my Lord, this is Jacob, my Lord knoweth that the children are tender, and the flocks and the herds are with young are with me. And if men would overdrive them one day, all the flock will die. Verse 14, let my Lord, I pray thee, pass over before his servant, and I will lead on softly, according as the cattle that goeth with me, and the children be able to endure until I come unto my Lord, unto Seir. Now, there's a question to Jacob's response to Esau's invitation to follow him to Seir, his Esau's country. We know, obviously, that Jacob didn't follow him to Seir. But did that mean that he didn't want to? That he had nothing else to do with his brother, that he was finished. Now, we are friends now at this place, but will this condition remain? That seems to be maybe what Jacob was thinking. You want me to follow you all the way home? But in the back of Jacob's mind, he's probably thinking, I'm not going to your home. Let me borrow another comment from Clark. It is very likely that Jacob was perfectly sincere in his express purpose of visiting Esau at Seir, but it is as likely that circumstances afterwards occurred that rendered it either improper or impracticable. And we find that Esau afterwards removed to Canaan, and he and Jacob dwelt together there for several years. So they do come together. Again, we'll find this in chapter 36 of Genesis, that it's Esau that comes to where Jacob is. In verse 15, Esau said, "Let me now leave with thee some of the folk that are with me." And he said, "What needeth it? Let me find grace in the sight of my Lord." Now, the head of 400 armed men, Esau, probably at first meditating revenge, maybe, we don't know, or to make a display of his power. Maybe that's it. But Jacob, he was a man of prayer, and he had often asked God to guard him, to keep him, to protect him. And he had that wrestling match before this meeting here with his brother. So I think he's leaning on that as well. Jacob was full of hope, full of confidence, and he wanted to do that which was right in the eyes of God. He's now the prevailer. The sun's shining on him, and it's better. And still, God lifts up upon him the light of his countenance, shines on him, if you will. He had sent the forward, the present, and now he places himself in the advance of the rest. He's behind the whole crowd, if you will. And so, verse 16, Esau returned that day on his way unto Seir. Verse 17, Jacob journeyed to Succoth and built him an house and made booths for his cattle. Therefore, the name of the place is called Succoth. So Esau makes his way back home. The time will come, though, that he'll come once again to be with his brother Jacob. This place, Succoth, it's mentioned several times in the scriptures, and we're told there was a place in Egypt by this name, as well as 3 places in Canaan by this name. The name Succoth means booths, booths. And when we get to the book of Leviticus, chapter 23, we'll find reference to this place where they would gather for what was called the Feast of Tabernacles, when they would come together and build booths. For 7 days, they would abide in that particular place and worship God. Verse 18, Jacob came to Shalom, the city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan, when he came from Padanaram and pitched his tent before the city. Verse 19, and he bought a parcel of a field where he had spread his tent at the hand of the children of Hamor, Shechem's father, for 100 pieces of money. Verse 20, and he erected there an altar and called it Elohe Israel. So interesting. Jacob stops in this place, for a while, rested for a while for the sake of the cattle, no doubt, as the travels of his family in Succoth, and then journeys on to this place called Shalom. And it's no doubt that he felt safe now, rested from his long experience, and relieved after his visit and meeting with Esau. Now, and may we keep in mind on our journey with Jacob that although Jacob, by God's blessing, was the proprietor in the right of inheritance, yet not 1 inch, not even a foot of land that he really owned. He hadn't owned anything yet. So, and the last but not least, let me mention in closing here, he erected there an altar. So Jacob, I guess we say, continued what his grandfather started when they first reached the land of promise, Canaan, and that was to build an altar. And he built that altar. This term, Elohe, Israel, Abram had built his first altar upon entering that place. And Abraham dedicated his unto the Lord who appeared unto him. Well, Jacob dedicated his God, the God of Israel. That's what this term means. Elohe. I'm probably not pronouncing it right, but our time's gone. God bless. God smile upon your people in Kenya. Let there be revival and growth throughout the country. Bless the church in the country, all the churches of the country, that your will be done, that revival will spread throughout the country. In your name, Jesus. Amen.
Amen, Bishop. Thank you very much.
God bless you, Sister Jacqueline, and your family.
God bless you. To see you tomorrow, Lord willing.
Lord willing.
Amen.